Sexy Fly is a good name for the next bloke. It's 8:14 on West Bremer Radio. Harold the H. Peacock. I missed him last week, but he was on with Damien and Spark Dog on Monday. But we're going to talk about the poisoned chocolate case of over a century ago. G'day, Harold.
Good morning, Danny. This is something you've just got to cut back on the chocolates. I think this is a warning for all chocolate eaters out there.
I'll tell you
be
what.
Careful.
We're recording you now. I've got to go and have a prostate test. I'll hand you over to Damien and I'll back after the prostate.
Okay, that could be a while, so we'll get onto it straight away.
Thanks, Dan. You enjoy yourself. There's a man out there with a rubber glove on right now. Harold, I love chocolate, so please tell me this story.
Yeah, it's the case of the poisoned chocolates. And when 96-year-old George Frederick Chapman passed away in nearby Lowood on the 16th of September 1919, he died a wealthy man. He left 4 sons, 3 daughters, 2 farms, and from the bank he'd just withdrawn £800 cash, which is almost $500,000 in today's money.
Wow.
He must have been a satisfied man. Anyway, George had appointed his second daughter, Caroline of Lowood, and his youngest child, Thomas, from Brassall here in Ipswich, as executors of his estate. But then weird things started to happen. Caroline received in the post an anonymous letter and a mourning band that had been worn at the funeral. A card and a mock version of the will were left on the father's grave. Then things took a decidedly deadly turn when a box of chocolates wrapped up in brown paper and purportedly from her old Aunt Naomi from Logan were delivered to Caroline's home. Caroline offered one of the chocolates to a friend who had a quick taste and said it was extraordinarily bitter. The chocolates were handed into the police and 3 of them were found to contain the poison strychnine. Now, the dose would have been more than enough to kill whoever ate them, and suspicion was cast upon the oldest son, George Jr., from Sandy Creek near Coominya. That's because, although he was the oldest of 7 siblings, he was the only one not to benefit from the will. He'd been totally disinherited.
Oh.
George Sr.'s wife had died 6 years earlier in 1913, and that's when George rewrote his will for what he thought was the last time. But about 3 years after that, his daughter Caroline returned from Kalgoorlie in Western Australia with a gold mining husband, apparently to look after her aged father. It was at around this time that old George revoked his 1913 will and made another one, this time disinheriting his oldest son.
Right.
Now, the trouble for the Chapman family began after the reading the will. It was George Jr.'s wife, Annie Chapman, who took offence at her husband being cut off without a penny. Annie blamed her sister-in-law, Caroline. Annie was arrested and charged in the police court with sending chocolates containing strychnine through the post with intent to kill. Now, Detective Senior Sergeant John Donnelly prosecuted. He later became a private investigator and was known for having a client dressed as a woman while together they shadowed an estranged wife. But in Annie's case, her defence team found the Ipswich doctor Thomas Cooney. Now, Dr. Cooney examined Annie at the Goodna Mental Asylum and testified that she had certain physiological irregularities. He didn't go into that, but he did say this meant that after she had suffered from the flu, it was possible that she wasn't able to control her actions of sending the chocolates. Anyway, Annie was committed to stand trial in the Supreme Court before the Chief Justice, Sir Pope Cooper. She pleaded not guilty. The jury was locked up for 2 consecutive nights, and after considering their decision for about 3 hours, they returned a verdict of guilty with a recommendation of mercy. The judge said that the crime warranted imprisonment with hard labour for 5 years. But Annie was released straight away with just a 5-year good behaviour bond of £160. Annie probably had the last laugh because not only did she get off lightly, but around 10 years later, her brother-in-law and executor of the will, Thomas, who by then was living in Omar Street in West Ipswich, was declared bankrupt. And he remained an undischarged bankrupt for up to 15 years. Now, Annie was alleged to have told her arresting officer that revenge is sweet. And, Damo, it appears she was correct in this case of the poisoned chocolates here from the Ipswich district.
Listen,
You've got to
mate,
be careful when you eat these things.
Yeah, well, that's a great story. I had to pop out and pop back in. I heard the end of it. Fantastic story, as you always. You are one of the great... Look, I've got a bravery medalist in our studio, Kevin Hughes, and he is amazed at your skill sets at telling a story. He's bamboozled. He looks bamboozled. He looks like the Broncos last night. All right?
No. Well, hopefully he recovers quickly because the Broncos need to as well. But watch out for those poison chocolates, Danny. When people are friendly to you, you got to think why.
But while you talk about that, what about the bloke overseas, a good clean cut bloke who ate something, a street food over in China or somewhere, and they reckon he's been poisoned with rats. What's it called?
Oh, jeez, I didn't hear that.
Have you seen that? Yeah, it was in the news last night on Channel 9 News. Yeah, he's in a really bad way. He's a uni student, clean cut.
Maybe needs the chocolate as an antidote, perhaps.
There's a story there. When you got the food on the ground, you don't eat it off the ground. It's street food. It just doesn't taste any good.
Well, I'm absolutely gobsmacked at that story. That could be a Hollywood movie.
It could be, and sponsored by Cadbury's chocolates.
Good on you.
The case of the poisoned chocolates.
Mate, another great story. Now, how do we find out about all the stories that you tell us here on West Bremer Radio?
Yeah, go online to historyouthere.com. I'll be re-uploading this story first thing in the morning, but you can see 300 short stories there, all there, historyouthere.com.
And one eventually, Harold and I are going to, and the team are going to put a book together all about Ipswich, all these stories that he tells.
Absolutely. In fact, Danny, I want to come out in the studio in a couple of weeks' time and we can start planning it then.
I'm with you, buddy.